slightly different one to the CAPsMAN that I've done before. We are looking at a CAPsMAN setup, but this time the only two MikroTik devices we have are the access points only. So I'm going to be doing the same setup as I've done in multiple other CAPsMAN videos, but normally what I've got is my controller sits on my MikroTik router over here, which controls these access points. However, this time we're going to go, this is a generic router. It has the same VLANs on it. It has all the same routing config that we're going to tell our access points to route to. We have the same switch in the middle with the same VLANs. None of that is different, but let's assume this is not MikroTik. Now, full disclosure, in this setup, this is going to be a MikroTik because, as you can probably guess, I've got a lot of MikroTiks, and that's my preferred vendor to use. But for the purposes of this, we're not even going to look at the config of this because we're just going to assume that it's any other brand of router. It could be a Cisco, for example. So the routing's already set up, that's already working, but we want to introduce some MikroTik into our lives. So we're going to use we've gone out and we've got two MikroTik access points, but instead of configuring them each as standalone, we still want to have that level of control. And then because it's quite a small deployment, what we're going to then do is nominate one of these to be our controller. So it will control itself and the other one. Okay. So effectively what we're going to be doing is similar to a couple of guides I already have on my website and related videos. This one is a single setup for an access point. We're using both CAPsMAN and standalone, and then have a more detailed one that very similar setup to what I just showed you, whereas we're assuming this is not MikroTik, so we have no MikroTik to act as our controller. We only have our two access points here, but this will go through step-by-step guides of what we need to do. This is a full setup and has the videos related to, but the key things I want to just show you in this one is going to be this information here, which is also in this one, which is in a bit more detail about the separation of the channels. So I'll go through that once we come to setup. But effectively what we're going to be doing is configuring our two access points here and here, which is a factory reset, and we're going to use one as is going to be our controller and the other one's going to connect to that. So we know, if I go back to this one, because the VLANs are the same, we know that we've got these VLANs to use. The access points are currently going to sit on the native VLAN is going to be 10, and then our SSID VLAN is going to be that. So all we need to do is get the controller to tell the other access point about these SSIDs and their corresponding VLANs. Okay, we don't worry about any of this because this is already configured with other vendors. So let's pick one. Doesn't matter which one. You may want to choose one which is, closest, or depending on IP addresses, or there'll be a reason to which one to choose. This is factory reset, so there's nothing obviously in these windows here. But first thing we will need to do is just set our password. Okay, let's close these windows. Okay, so this is going to be my controller. So what I'm going to do is just go to system identity, and I'm just going to call this cap-01, and I'll put control to indicate that that's our controller. Now we can start with our networking side. So bridge, do our VLANs for our bridge. So we just need a single bridge set up. Let's call this LAN bridge. Okay, we will enable the VLAN filtering, but not until we've configured all our VLANs. So let's just apply that. Disable spanning tree as well. Okay, and then we go to ports. Now we're going to add our Ethernet 1, because this cap AX has two Ethernets, but we're only worried about Ethernet 1 because that's the one we're connected on. And then VLAN, we're going to say it's port VLAN, so its native VLAN is going to be 10 for management, Okay, we're going to admit all. Okay, that. Now on VLANs, we can add VLAN IDs of, so we'll do one for 10 first of all, and that's going to be tagged on our bridge, and it's going to be untagged on Ether1. Now we do the one for the SSID ones, so VLANs 20, 30, and they're going to be tagged on Ether1, so our SSID VLANs will be tagged, because remember it's a trunk port, we can only have one untagged or native. Okay, and then always remember to tag it on the bridge as well. Make sure I did that on this one. Tagged, yeah, always tag it on the bridge. Okay, so that's our VLANing side setup. Add a VLAN, we call it VLAN 10 management, and then that's going to sit on our LAN bridge. Okay, so that is automatically added into that bridge. This VLAN ID is 10, which we've got untagged, but we're going to assign the IP address to VLAN 10. Okay, apply that. Now we can go to enable our filtering, and we're going to tell this to, on the bridge itself, we're going to say admit VLAN tagged only. Okay, we apply that. So you can see now it says untagged on Ether1 for 10, and it's tagged on these two. Okay, that we've now got an IP address in that VLAN 10 range. Just to show you that again, that's that range there. Okay, so now we've got connectivity. That's all that set up. So now before we set up the CAPsMAN, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just export these settings, because these can be used for my cap itself. Okay, and then we'll alter them. So say we've got 3 access points you want to deploy, and one of them is going to be the controller, 2 of them are going to be clients, if you like. So we can basically build the next one we'll build, but to kind of skip these steps I've just done, we'll just do all, because this side of it's all going to be the same. So we can just go ahead and do an export, show sensitive, which doesn't matter, we haven't got any passwords or anything we need to copy across the config in this one, but you never know. File, and then just call this cap basic. Yeah, cap basic. Okay, then we look at our files, and then cap basic is there. Let's go ahead and not restore, we're going to download that to our desktop. Okay, right, that'll be used later on, but we can pretty much go ahead and close all of these now. Now we're going to do our CAPsMAN. Now the reason I didn't want to do that export step after I've done this one, because the settings for these two are going to be different. So remember, this is our controller, so this is where we would build ours, just like we do all the settings under configure the CAPsMAN controller. So these steps are pretty much going to be the same, but in fact they're going to be the same, but we're also going to make this one, this has built-in Wi-Fi, so this is going to be, in fact I did a video where I did a CAPsMAN video where I had 2 access points and a controller, but the controller itself had Wi-Fi in it. So yeah, check that out here. Then you can, it's basically the same principle. We're going to use the config for the CAPsMAN side of it, which will be controlling the other, or configuring the other access points, but then we'll apply that to itself as well. So first thing we do is build our config. So we start with our data path. Now this is going to be to provision our VLANs. We want it to be, we won't worry about the bridge there, but we'll put the VLAN ID, and this one's going to be data path guest. The VLAN ID for this was 30. Let me add a data path corporate for our corporate SSID, and that one was 20. Okay, now we work back to security. I'm going to do 2 security profiles. First one is security, we'll do guest, authentication type, PA2, PSK, and then we'll just put a password in there, simple. I'll just turn off hidden password so you can see that, make sure I typed it correct. Okay, and then we're just going to do PSK as well for our corporate. And then let's assume we're using a stronger password. Obviously this one, the guest one, you can remove this and then you could use hotspot as well, but I wouldn't recommend doing too many features on the actual access point itself. You want it to primarily do this sort of deployment is fine for a few access points, but you know, if you've got hundreds of access points and you really need an actual controller to be managing all of this is just, you know, you want to improve your Wi-Fi at home. You've gone out and brought some MikroTik access points, and you've got I don't know, Netgear or some other router, and you basically want to you don't want to then have another MikroTik device to do the control necessarily. Then you've got this option just to increase your Wi-Fi. So channel, this is where we could add them manually like this, but this is where I brought up this section here, which obviously in more detail here. So these are the bands I recommend you use. Without going into too much detail, you've got 2.4, you've only got 3 channels you can use, so you don't get overlapping because it's quite a narrow space. 2.4, 5 is bigger, but then there's still sections of it which aren't ideal to use. So I would recommend using number 1 and number 3 in that space, which are all here. So these are the individual ones, and then I've created these ranges, which will basically mean that the access point will pick from one of those. And then for 5 gig, I've done it so it'll either pick from, you can either choose from 1, from 3, or from all the available ones. And note that obviously the frequency, everything you may have heard of the channel, but then a channel refers to an actual frequency within that band. So that's what they are. And then you've got the complete list here. So I would just add that all in. So if you ever do want to manually set an access point during a particular channel, then you've got those options without having to come back and add it in. So bring up a terminal. So what I'm showing you now, you could go ahead and just do this on both access points and have them both as standalone. You don't necessarily have to use the CAPsMAN feature, but if you've got more than one, then why not? Rather than having to do this multiple times, and then you've got that option. And if you decide you want to change your PSK, you've only got one place to change it. So okay, that's channel done. Now we're going to build our configuration files. So we'll call this config dash corporate. The SSID is going to be MikroTik masters. And this is going to be our 2G one. I'll separate out 2G and 2.4 and 5G. On my, I'd always recommend that because then you control which frequency your clients are using. Whereas on the guest one, we'll just do it in the same. We can probably set the country as well, just for best practice. Okay, that should be fine. Channel. This is our 2G one, wasn't it? So we're going to select our 2G auto. Security. This was corporate, so we can select that one. And data path is going to be corporate. Okay, now we can open this one up and we can copy this, because these ones are all going to be the same, but channel will need to be the 5 gig, and I'm going to use a non-DFS, so that was the full range. And then we just call this config-corp-5G. Okay, and then change the SSID to 5G there. There we go. Now I'm going to build our guest one now. We'll just have a single one for guest because we're just going to call this MikroTik masters dash guest. Again, set the country. And then we go channel. Sorry, I should have mentioned we don't need to set the channel on this one because these are going to be our primary SSIDs, 2.4 and 5, and then the guest is then going to be a sub interface. So it'd be a dynamically one that's created, but because it's the SSID on the same radio, it has to obviously use the same channel that the one above is using. So we don't need to worry about that, but all the other settings we can change. So guest and then data path, and I'll go into a little more detail when we actually get these live, and I'll show you what I mean. So there's our configuration. Now we're going to apply this configuration to this local one. So we can call this Wi-Fi. So Wi-Fi 1 is our 5G. Okay, and then configuration. We will select the Corp 5G channel. Oh, sorry, we don't need to select that because that's going to populate all from all there. The only thing we do need to set is a data path and tell it to be in bridge, sorry, LAN bridge on the actual interface itself. Okay, that one. Do the same for 2 gig, 2G. Configuration 2G, that's fine, and we'll leave the rest except for that data path. Just set the bridge to be LAN bridge. Okay. Right, so that's that done. So we can go ahead and, before we enable that actually, we're going to add our guests, which are going to be sub interfaces. This is where we need to add some dynamic ones. Sorry, it's not dynamic, but some secondary ones. So we call this one 5G-guest. And its master is going to be the 5G one. Configuration will be guest. Okay, and then again data path be LAN. Add another one. $5G. No, we've done 5G and we 2G dash guest. Master is going to be 2G. And then, sorry, I missed configuration. Configuration is going to be guest again. And data path LAN bridge. Now let's enable these ones. Okay. There we go. We've got some, let's pick some channels. So this is what I meant before. So there's the frequencies they can pick from. These are the channels they selected. And as you see, these two ones, which are sub interfaces of these two, are matching these ones. Okay, so let's go ahead and click on registration. So there's nothing connected at the moment. Let's go ahead and connect. Let's try the guest one first of all. Connecting. Okay, connected. In registration, there I am. Connected on the SSID guest. I'm on 2 gig. Let's do IP config. And there we go. I'm on the guest network, which if we look on here, back on that diagram, there we go. Guest starts with 30 as a third octet. Okay. And then remember, we haven't set any DHCP or anything on here. Those IP addresses don't exist here. We've only got the management. That's all been done by the other non-MikroTik, or it technically is MikroTik, but you know what I mean, supposedly non-MikroTik stuff. So that's a single access point up and running. In our bridge, we've got, now I'm connected, we've got that dynamic interface added with, then it's tagged on VLAN 30. Okay, and that was done, which is why we were doing this data path section. That's what that's for. Now we're going to use all that. So we've got a standalone AP all working, tickety boo. We're going to now use this configuration to deploy our second cap. So we're going to turn this also now into a CAPsMAN controller. So we're going to do provisioning first of all. And this is basically going to tell any access points that join it what configuration to give it based on certain criteria. And we're going to do it based on the bands. So if you get to 5G AX access point connect to it, it's going to basically create and enable it at the same time. So it'll add it in and it will enable it, but you can have it as disabled. And then we're going to give it this primary connection, this configuration here, which is going to be our what we're doing 5G there, and our secondary one is going to be guest. Okay, we can apply that, we can copy, and we just change this to be for our 2 gig interfaces. Going to give it that config, and then the guest is the same. Okay, So we set that up first. If you set this up afterwards and you've already joined the access point to it, you need to go ahead and remove it, basically. Drop your CAPsMAN and then re-enable it, okay? And now we're going to actually turn on CAPsMAN. So we go on to this far side one, this remote cap. So this is the CAPsMAN controller. We enable it. We're going to say discover our other access points on VLAN 10. Certificate, we're going to say auto, and it's going to generate me 2 certificates in here when I apply this. There we go. And then what we're going to do on the client side, we'll then request the certificate, and then this will create us a certificate in here in its repository, and it uses those for the communication between, for encryption and security. So that's all up and running. Now let's go ahead and do our client cap. So new inbox. Let's jump into our other one. Again, it's been reset, so I have to add in that password. Close all of these. Okay. Now what we can do is we'll go to our so there's 2 ways we can do this. We can go to system, restore configuration, and then under files we can import. So upload from desktop this basic. Okay, and then we can say after you've reset, no configuration, but then run this script, which is basically going to be our basic settings. But then it's going to reboot, and then we're going to have to set the password again. We're only changing the networking stuff. So what I'm just going to do is open up a terminal, and then I'm going to grab that file, open it up, and then what we can do is just copy this, and then back in Winbox, make sure I'm the right one. I haven't named this one yet. I'm going to say no to that. Just right click and paste. Okay, and as you can see, it's now changed it to that same name, so we'll go ahead firstly and change that, and we'll call this cap2 without any other wording. So this is basically my client. Okay, and if we look, we should have our bridge all set up. There we go, it's all up and going, and our DHCP client should have an IP address. Yep, it does. So that's all done. So that just saves us a bit of time and to redo that. And now we can go in and do our Wi-Fi stuff. So we're not going to do any of this stuff here in this one, because this is what we did it in the other one for. All we need to do on this side is just go to cap on this bit, not this remote cap, but the cap here. So this is the client side. Enable it. We're going to discover it on our VLAN 10. Certificate we're going to request, and that's why I said it's going to generate a certificate. Okay, and that's the only thing we really need to do there. We can apply that. We should see a certificate come up. There we go, and we can see the name of the controller there. And if we jump back on that one, we'll see in our, there we go, it can see that it can see it there. And also if we go to system certificates, that's where that is. So if you do have, if you're resetting or reconfiguring, you wanted to change an access point, you reconfigured it, reset it, whatever, and you can't get it to connect back to the CAPsMAN, chances are that there's a certificate already here. As you can see, it's using the MAC address. So the best thing to do, come into the controller, remove the client one itself, matching on its MAC address, and then restart and stop and start CAPsMAN on the client, and you'll find that that'll often fix it. Okay, so now we need to just go into our interfaces. We need to set our data path. We need to tell it to be LAN bridge. We do this on every single interface, whether it's a CAPsMAN or non-CAPsMAN. And then we don't need to tell it its configuration, but we just need to tell it to be managed by CAPsMAN. And then we do the same for our second one. Configuration manager, CAPsMAN, data path, bridge, LAN bridge. There we go. So here we have our 2 physical, 1 and 2, which is 2.4, 5 and 2.4, and then here's our dynamic ones it's added. So last time, remember on this one, we had to manually go in and add these secondary ones, but on this one we've actually created them dynamically. As you can see, it's given it all the configuration details that we want. So there's the SSIDs, and as you can see on here, operated by cap, So that is our remote ones. And there's our remote settings. So for example, we can change this one to be, individually we can change it to be guest test. Okay, that there. And then go back in here and it will have changed it to be guest test. Now that means when I load up my Wi-Fi, I should see a guest test in there. There it is. Connect. 1, 2, 3. There we are. So now I'm connected to registration. Sorry, I'm on Cap2. You won't see any registrations on the actual access points themselves, only on the controller access point. There we go. So I'm on the virtual one. So I'm on the Cap access point, because we basically manually set that. To change that back, just undo that. It will be blank, but when you apply, it will populate it again. So it's going to drop me off the Wi-Fi there. So yeah, pretty cool. We've got CAPsMAN running, 2 access points, and we haven't got a single router involved. So yeah, you can literally take this up, and providing that your VLANs are set properly. I mean, you could do this without VLANs. You don't have to do VLANs. If this is on your home one, instead of the VLAN side, everything's just done on the bridge. So you give the bridge the IP address, a DHCP client, for example, and then you don't worry about the data path side. On here, you don't need to specify a VLAN ID. So simple as that. Okay, so I've done one of my very first CAPsMAN videos I did it that way, so yeah, check that out. In fact, I think the one I did with the 2 caps and the 1 router, again, there was no VLANs involved, so that might be a bit clearer. Check that one out as well. But yeah, there's lots of different ways you can configure this all, so I'm trying to sort of tackle all of them. But if you've got any questions, queries, as I was going to say, sorry, this one now what we've got, if we had a 3rd access point we wanted to configure, we take the client one, we do that same process of we do export, show sensitive, and then file, and then we call this one cap config, for example, and then we can then download that one and import it into our secondary one when it's completely blank, and then that will have all the settings we want. It will basically, you can then reboot it. You don't even have to reboot it, and then it will come up as your third or your second client, your 3rd AP. So anyway, thanks for watching. Hope that was useful. Yeah, please comment. Any ideas, any thoughts, please let me know. If not, I'll see you on the next one. Thanks for watching.